It is Thursday, January 28th, 2016, and you are listening live to the Hard Starboard Radio Network on blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. I am your host, Mideast, your ruler, your benevolent despot, your fountain rabbi of conservatism, constitutionalism, Christianity, and common sense, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Guest call-in number 646-478-5068. Email address jazzmius@comcast.net. The chat room is open. 8 2/3 years worth of podcasts await your downloading attentions here at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. 6.5 years more are available at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review, a production of the Hard Starboard Radio Network. Airing at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, it is the kickoff and first 2 hours of the 3-hour Saturday afternoon extravaganza, co-hosted by myself and Mr. Douglas V. Gibbs, the fellow with the American Freedom Alliance, the director for the Center for the Studies of the United States Constitution, and the host, of course, of the third hour of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza on KMET1490am.com, Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, co-hosted by Mr. Gibbs and myself, and the decorated Vietnam veteran and Gabby Hayes aficionado, Mr. Alex Ferguson. And throughout the entire 3 hours, we discuss, knock around, analyze, break down the All-Star Collision Big Stories of the Week, brought to you by All-Star Collision, located at 522 Railroad Street in Corona, California. Any auto body detailing or repair needs you may have, they're the place to go in the Gibbs pocket. Log on to allstarci.com to find out more about them and what they have going on, any specials currently running. To speak to a live Patriot, call 951-279-9161. All-Star Collision, the kings of rock and roll. And they bring you the All-Star Collision, the big stories of the week each and every week. Have been for a while, quite a while now. God willing, will continue to do so. Where was I yesterday? I will tell you where I was yesterday. I was waiting for a phone call to go pick up my car, which I decided to cough up to have repaired because for the next, let's see, February, March, April, May, for about the next 4 months or thereabouts, my daughter, intern Mideast, for whom doors open without her even having to touch the doorknob, and good for her, she will be commuting approximately 20 miles each way for the next 4 months to her new job as a para-educator with the Auburn, Washington School District. So she will be needing a car that works. And I needed to do something in order to at least get a waiver so I could renew the tabs on it. And then I thought about it Monday night. I thought, well, she is going to be commuting each and every day, and this problem is only going to get worse. That's the other thing. The problem with the vehicle was there was a hole in the intake manifold, and that was only going to get worse as time went on, and then that created other problems, like wearing out much sooner the catalytic converter that I just had put in it 9 months ago. So I knuckled under, used up the last of my repair fund, as I thought of it. And so now that's completely exhausted. But hey, between multiple plumbing repairs and multiple big-ticket automotive, $1,500 on the car in question in the past month. $1,500, and I have no income. I sit here at the age of 51, and I'm 14 years too young to retire. And I look at what it's costing my dad to live in assisted living, and then I game out how long that would last if I had the same amount that I have now, all the way up to retirement, and then in the scenario that he's in, and then I stop and think that, well, if I don't have an income ever again until I start collecting Social Security, it'll last a long time, but it's not going to last long enough. So pray for me. I need an income, uh, a job, a radio gig, Constitution Radio to finally get the big break, Center for the United States Constitution to be overrun with donations, big ticket donations, so I can get on there and start getting paid for all the things that I am doing for Mr. Douglas V. Gibbs that I have done gratis since day one, and I really could use a paycheck for all that I do. And Mr. Gibbs could use a paycheck too. So I mean, this is about, you know, he can catch as little of a break as I can. And of course, he doesn't even have a nest egg to draw down prematurely. And well, and don't forget, he's a year and a half younger than I am. So we could catch. We could really use a break. Both of us could. So that's what we need. Give it to us. Now! And we got but I was waiting for the call yesterday to go and pick up the vehicle, which came at about 4:45. So, and I didn't, not knowing when they were going to call, I didn't feel like I could, once it got really close to where I really had to have thrown a show together, and they still hadn't called, I just didn't feel like I could, start a podcast and then not be there to pick up the phone when they called to tell me it was ready. And the ironic part is that I called them, and they said that it probably wouldn't be ready until this morning. And like 5 minutes later, they called me back and say, "Oh, the guy just finished it. Come on over and pick it up." So I was able to do that, as it turned out. So that's where I was yesterday. It's a unique set of circumstances, and I really pray I don't have to spend an extra dime on my cars for a very, very long time, long after I have an income again. Let's just put it that way. And there's a lot of things with that we missed yesterday. I'm probably going to go all 3 hours, this third-hour podcast only. So with no further ado, we have no time to waste. Trumplicans, your leader is laughing at you. Whereas I am still trying to make up my mind between joining his laughter or simply throttling all of you one at a time. And trust me, my Trumplican friends, I am in the mood to do it and take great pleasure from it. Not that this will break his spell over you, of course. I mean, it does border on the political equivalent of demonic possession, after all. And maybe only a psychiatrist could rummage around in your scarred and hideously deformed psyches for the deep down answer, but shouldn't outright gleeful taunts like the following bother you, even on a subconscious level? And, for example, this tweet from Daniel Dale. Trump acknowledging the act. When I'm president, I'm a different person. I can be the most politically correct person you've ever seen. All a pundit at hotair.com tried Herculeanly, yes, that is a word because I just used it, to find some rationality somewhere in this anti-Trumplican noogie. Quote, he's talking about tone here, and he's made this point about tone before. He's aggressive and anti-PC on the trail in a knife fight with 15 other candidates. Because that's, well, actually it's down to 11 other candidates by this time, but still. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow on Open Thigh, Open Thighs Fridays, just as a sneak preview, a promo, as they say in the wrestling biz and the radio biz. Because that's what it takes to win. But if winning at the job of the presidency requires a different tone, then that's the tone he'll take. This must be the first time in American history where it's impossible to predict not only what a major party candidate would do as president, given Trump's volatile political history. All we can count on is that there will be deals, but how he would sound, close quote. It would be most accurate to say, I think, that just as Trump will say or do anything to win in any given situation, he will also say or do it in any way he has to win as well. Probably all that matters to Trumplicans is the part about winning, since they're already haplessly and irretrievably hooked. I mean, everything else is wah-wah, 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 wah-wah. You know that Far Side cartoon once, back in the day, when the caption was, what you say to your dog, and then you say, oh, Rover, does Rover want dinner? Does Rover want dinner? Is Rover hungry? Are you hungry, boy? And then what your dog hears. Blah, 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 dinner. Blah, 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 hungry. Blah, 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 Rover. And so on. That's pretty much it. That's what Trumplicans hear when their hero speaks. But still, being politically incorrect, in other words, being a prick, that's how he defines it in practice, to the right people, in other words, establishment Republicans, was what vaulted Trump to the top of the Republican polls in the first place. It's the core, the emblem of his candidacy. Now he's canoodling with that same hated GOP establishment, insulting Ted Cruz, the true conservative populist, as a whack job, quote unquote, in his best John McCain impression, and boasting about how politically correct he's going to be after he's been elected, which is of a piece with all the right-to-left flip-flops he's done on every significant issue, including illegal immigration. He's giving rhetorical golden showers to his core of the core supporters. And there they stand, heads up, mouths wide open, slurping down every drop like it was nectar from the proverbial gods. And that's probably not the only one of Trump's figurative body fluids they're swallowing by the gallon. Hey, super virility is the hallmark of the ultimate alpha male, you know. Forget shooting somebody else in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Trump is shooting himself through the head repeatedly, and he's impervious to it because that's just not a vital organ for him or his brainwashed minions. But damn it all, it should be. To borrow and slightly edit this exit quote from Pundit, Trumplicans' reward for spinning for Trump here is watching this fake conservative slam Ted Cruz as a whack job for doing exactly the sort of thing that Trumplicans, back when they were Tea Partiers, have been celebrating Ted Cruz for doing for the past 3 years. Enjoy caucus night, everybody. Okay. Okay. Now then, and we'll come back to Donald Trump. Rest assured, it's impossible not to these days. The other day, Pope Francis asked Iran, the Islamic Empire of Iran, to work for Middle East peace, stop the spread of terrorism, reverse time, make water run uphill, walk on water, and part the Red Sea. And all manner of other impossible things that would be miraculous, shall we say. The latter 4 of which I'm sure the mullahs would be perfectly willing to take on if it meant expanding their empire across the Middle East via the proverbial sword and spreading weapons of mass destruction-fueled terrorism across the planet. I know that Francis is in love with the sound of his own voice, but I wouldn't think even he would be this eager to waste his breath this egregiously. Newsmax provided the quote. Pope Francis on Tuesday met Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and asked Tehran. Here. Okay. I thought I might have to sneeze a second time, but I'm good. And I'm sure Pope Francis on Tuesday met Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and asked Tehran to work with other Middle East states to promote peace and stop the spread of terrorism and arms trafficking in the region. And I'm sure they will. In the same way that Chairman Mao used to say that peace flows from the barrel of a gun, and that gun must never fall from the grasp of the Communist Party. Once Tehran dominates the entire Middle East, I have no doubt that there will be what the mullahs will undoubtedly dub peace, and their dhimmi slaves will be too busy burying all their irradiated dead to engage in any counter-terrorism of their own, so that box will be checked off as well. Thus will be created a peace through conquest and enforced surrender that is the only one the Quran teaches. Remember, Islam divides the world into 2 spheres, 2 parts. Dar al-Islam, the abode of peace, in other words, the parts of the world controlled by Muslims, and Dar al-Harb, the abode of war, the realm of the infidels, you might say. That's it. So any part of the world that they control, that is, by definition, a portion of the world that is at peace, quote unquote. Thus will a peace through conquest and enforced surrender be the only one the Quran teaches. if anybody is looking for a just Middle East peace, a real one, in other words, I don't think Francis is being nearly that particular. A Vatican statement issued after the meeting spoke of the relevant role Iran is called on to play to find political solutions to the problems afflicting the Middle East, specifically mentioning terrorism and weapons trafficking, of which Iran is the principal instigator and perpetrator, and financier, and organizer, and carrier out of. If Francis had lived 80 years ago, he'd doubtless have asked Adolf Hitler to attend synagogue service wearing a yarmulke. How do y'all think that would have turned out? Iran's president asked Pope Francis to pray for him Tuesday after the two men held private talks at the Vatican. Rouhani's visit to the Holy See. This is how the news. This is how the article is written, folks. Rouhani's visit to the Holy See saw the first meeting between a pope and an Iranian president since 1999. Yes, they really said the Holy Seesaw. I didn't catch that before. There it is. Well, you know, Hassan Rouhani is one smooth as caramel. Smooth as my wife's bottom. Yeah, it is, come to think of it. Everything that his predecessor Mahmoud Dinner Jacket Ahmadinejad was not. And two, Rouhani knows every bit how much of a fool his unholiness is and is playing him like a Stradivarius, which is his job on the BS tour of Europe, on which he's been embarked to lock in European subservience to the Islamic Empire of Iran. Looks like the mullah's front man is off to a rousing start. And speaking of that, just as one additional aside, because this is too good not to share, and I'm diligent. Here it is. You would never. Well, of course you'll guess. I was going to say you'll never guess what Rouhani did shortly after that, but then no, you'll guess it if you didn't see it in the news. If you didn't see it at politicalpistachio.com, you will guess it. It makes perfect sense. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani defended the Charlie Hebdo attacks before heading off to Paris. Here's what I mean. Again, this was on Tuesday. Came this Pope Francis met Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and asked Tehran to work with other Middle East states to promote peace and stop the spread of terrorism and arms trafficking in the region. And then, yesterday, came this. This is from Yahoo.com. But in an apparent reference to the French satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo, Rouhani said, freedom of expression doesn't mean offending that which is sacred to Muslims. Hey, at least he's being honest, you know. Islam is to be respected. Our books and the millions of people who follow our faith, Rouhani said. Insulting them, he said, creates division and doesn't help anyone. That's anyone. Nod, nod, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Doesn't help you infidels. Well, I suppose that doesn't contradict France's request, technically. I mean, after all, Rouhani isn't defending jihadism in the Middle East. He's defending it in Europe. Nice of the Pope to dispensationalize him that loophole, huh? Well, gosh darn it, that's just the kind of guy that Pope Francis is, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I tell you what, man. Anybody who has the slightest knowledge, even a rudimentary knowledge of 20th century history, took one look at this story and said, well, first of all, a chill went down their spine and a queasiness settled in the pit of their stomach, and they said something along the lines of, holy bleep, are you kidding me? Where is that? Is it in Des Moines, Iowa? Yeah, that's right. In Des Moines, Iowa. Now, this isn't on an official state or city building or a federal building. So it's not yet, anyway. This is just on some Trumplican's private property. So, it's not anything official yet. But here's the headline. Giant Trump poster becomes pilgrimage site. I crap you not. Giant Trump poster becomes pilgrimage site. I'm not making that up, folks. This is the creepy, un-American personality cult that is metastasizing within the Republican Party like the most lethal, rapid form of stage 4 cancer. Fortunately, this is one crank fanboy on his private property, for now. If Trump realizes all his ambitions, we can count on such idolatrous displays defacing every public building across the country by executive decree. Just like his name feces are smeared all over every last one of his misbegotten properties. Probably accompanied by some form of official hand gesture to boot. Oh, I'm not gonna demonstrate it for the jazziest cam. You know what I'm talking about. Here's the quote from. Okay, I'll find. Oh, okay. Here's a quote from the French Associated Press, AFP. Delusions of grandeur appear to have passed from Donald Trump to his supporters. A man has erected a large poster of the Republican candidate alongside a major thoroughfare in Iowa, making it, their word, folks, a pilgrimage site for those who marvel at Trump's nonsensical presidential run for the White House. Pilgrimage site. That definitely has religious overtones, doesn't it? A pilgrimage site? And you wonder why I use the term idolatrous to describe Donald Trump? The 4-foot by 8-foot photograph has become a landmark of sorts in a residential suburb of Iowa's capital of Des Moines. It shows Trump with his mouth open and a rictus and his eyes hard and focused, as if he might be unleashing one of his many tirades or delivering a takedown of a rival. I've always been a little bit of a Trump fan, said George Davey, good-natured computer engineer by day, inventor by night. And I think he's a bit more than just a little bit of a Trumplican. Trump supporters and U.S. media have flocked to Davies posters since November. I hope they didn't tromp across his yard. You look at this, and I mean, it's got lights around. It's like a billboard. It's got lights all around it. I mean, at least it doesn't have a spotlight shining up on it that I can tell. It's chilling, isn't it? Go to politicalpistachio.com. It's still on the main page. It is chilling. And I'm not talking about rapturous awe either. Does nobody but I see how fascist grand spectacle-esque this is? Complete with quasi-religious terminology and imagery? I mean, think back to 20th century history. In what sort of countries did you see giant banners and giant portraits of national leaders? Think back. How about Red Square? Lenin, for example. How about in Beijing, Tiananmen Square? Gigantic portraits of Mao Zedong everywhere. How about in North Korea, the Kim dynasty? There are portraits of all of them. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un. And of course, not Hitler and Nazi Germany, Benito Mussolini, and by the way, I found a side-by-side picture showing a typical Benito Mussolini expression. Remember Il Duce, the Italian dictator, in the run-up to and then through most of World War II. The typical public expression of Benito Mussolini, and the pictures right alongside a picture of Donald Trump, they could be brothers, ladies and gentlemen. No joke. They could be brothers. The expressions are I mean, it's like Trump spent years studying Benito Mussolini's facial expressions and facial tics and mannerisms and memorized them and practiced them himself. I mean, it is chilling. It really is. And it's kind of funny. It shows a picture of Benito Mussolini from 1925 with the exact with this haughty expression on his face, and it says Il Duce. That was his Italian title. And then a picture of Trump with the exact same expression, identical. And it says 2015 Il Douche. Gotta like that. But I mean, the picture, the two pictures side by side. I mean, you would think they were twins, if not for Mussolini wearing a helmet in this picture, and Trump, of course, has his bouffant and all its faux glory. But I mean, it's the same. It's the same expression. Now, this is not who we as Americans are, ladies and gentlemen. Great big, enormous portraits of leaders and a cult of personality. That's not who we are, or at least we weren't before 2008. It's definitely not who conservative Republicans have been pre-Trump mania. and are supposed to still be, has so many on the right, my fellow conservatives, really fallen this far, this fast? So mentally addled by irrational, corrosive, raging anger at the GOP establishment, a term that, by the way, has been completely drained of any lingering practical meaning and is now just a sneering epithet, the rhetorical equivalent of an extended middle finger. So self-deluded by the notion that all that's needed to take everything we want is to elect somebody who will fight, fight, fight hard enough, regardless of the built-in obstacles to such destabilizing change that the Founding Fathers wrote into the Constitution. See, now for whom is the Constitution an obstacle? Seems like it's some of my fellow conservatives, doesn't it? How many, in fact, think about that for a minute. How many times do you hear conservatives who claim to be constitutionalists say, we don't have that kind of time. We got to turn it around now. What about the Constitution? Our Constitution was written to prevent wild, destabilizing changes that could create the level of discord and emotional, high emotions and anger and rage that lead to violence and violent revolution. That's why the Constitution was written the way it was, so that power would be as divided as possible in order to preserve the system itself. People think process, it's boring. It doesn't matter. It is everything. Without constitutional process, then it's just who has a bigger mob. And just for the record, the Democrats have the bigger mob. Just thought I'd remind you of that. So, I mean, have things gotten so bad, has so many conservatives really fallen that far, that fast, that they're willing to just throw out the Constitution, and that the first demagogue that comes along and tells them what they want to hear, despite having nothing in his background to suggest that he believes a word he's saying or deliver on a single one of his promises, which flip and flop back and forth from week to week and even day to day, can get them to blow their heretofore zealously cherished conservative principles out the nearest airlock without a second thought, vetting free? Well, and you knew this was coming. Yes, they have! Just look at that down payment above on the wannabe American Il Duce. The Des Moines Trump pilgrimage site. The golden Trump calf. With all the Trumplicans dancing around it like nuts after cutting themselves and whatever else. I've got a few hand gesture suggestions. Hand gesture suggestions. Hey, I got it on the third try for Presidente di Clase, but they're probably not very likely to become official. Oh, by the way, here is the latest Trump betrayal. This is why I say, like I said in the earlier Trump piece, he is laughing at you, Trumplicans. He is laughing at you. He is openly admitting, he's openly expressing his contempt for you, that you are this easy to manipulate and fool. Remember, Donald Trump got into this race by demonizing the Republican establishment and telling Tea Partiers everything they wanted to hear about illegal immigration. Everything they wanted to hear. And talking about, oh, I'm not politically correct. I'm at war with political correctness. Yeah! Well, not only is Trump cozying up to the hated GOP establishment, now get a load of this from hotair.com. Money line. And this is Donald Trump. Quote, I always had a great relationship with Harry Reid. And frankly, if I weren't running for office, I'd be able to deal with her, Nancy Pelosi. I'd be able to deal with Reid. I'd be able to deal with anybody. What do you think is going to happen if Donald Trump becomes president, my Trumplican friends? This point has been made often, most recently by Andy McCarthy, but it can't be repeated enough. This guy is on the verge of beating Ted Cruz as an outsider by touting his record of cronyism. How can you be anti-establishment, wonders McCarthy, when you're crowing about your history of essentially bribing politicians, including politicians from the other party? It's a perfect compliment to Trump, the least socially conservative candidate in the Republican field, landing the endorsement of the son of the man who founded the moral majority. Trump's success is like a flashing road sign that says Republicans don't actually care about most of the things they claim to care about. Close quote. And that includes the base as well. Because a lot of Republicans, you have to refer to them, you have to call them former conservatives, are all in for Donald Trump. I mean, is that all it takes to fool Tea Partiers? Or conservatives, whatever. Is that all it takes? Donald Trump is gleefully doing everything that Tea Partiers absolutely, here up to now, detested. Donald Trump is the establishment now. He's embraced the establishment. He's embraced the Democrats. And what do his supporters, what do Trumplicans say? Yeah! Let me address that by answering the subsequent a la pundit question, folks. Quote, I don't understand how Trump fans reconcile the fact that this guy spent 6 months running as a strongman who'd impose his will on Washington through a combination of charisma, an electoral mandate, and raw executive power, but has spent most of the past month touting his willingness and ability to make deals with every Democrat in Washington, as if Pelosi and Schumer will accede to his demands out of sheer admiration for his testicular fortitude. Well, it's very simple, a la pundit. Trump was lying about being a conservative and a Republican and a populist for 6 months to completely program his supporters to the point where they really wouldn't leave him, even if he actually did shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Yeah, if it was an establishment Republican, they'd probably carry him off, carry him up to Trump Towers on their shoulders like the conquering hero. And now Trump feels sufficiently confident to come out of the closet as the corrupt, cronyist New York liberal deal maker he's always been, even to the point of openly telegraphing that it will be Schumer and Pelosi with whom he'll be making deals, not Ryan and McConnell, who will, along with their majorities, be totally shut out of the law-making process. Oh, and one more thing for you all to consider. One of the things that most incensed Tea Partiers about the most recent omnibus continuing resolution for fiscal year 2016 was all the earmarks that flowed so freely as part of the deal-making process. I mean, you go back and listen to the recent editions of Constitution Radio. What do you hear Doug Gibbs say? Screw earmarks. I hate earmarks. Earmarks are corruption. We should ban all. Remember, Alex Ferguson. Alex suggested we need standalone legislation to ban all earmarks. Earmarks are bad. Earmarks are terrible. Earmarks are corrupt. You think you're going to get more earmarks or fewer earmarks if Donald Trump is in the White House? Yes, I know. It's a rhetorical question. Basically, it's summable like this. Old and busted, but he fights! The new hotness. But he reaches across the aisle! We have lost our minds, folks. I don't know. See, I think I should be able to cram this in before the top of the hour break. Barack Obama has illegally decreed Cuban embargo, economic embargo, easings, partial lifting of the Cuban economic embargo, while Cuban illegal aliens pour into the United States, which is a Cuban strategy, by the way. Now, see if you can spot the one thing that's missing from the following quote, which is from Newsmax. And yes, this is or ought to be an easy one. Quote, the communist-ruled United States on Tuesday announced changes to its sanctions on Cuba where did I leave off on the ad queue? I'll just start there. The communist-ruled United States on Tuesday announced changes to its sanctions on Cuba, lifting export, payment, and financing restrictions and facilitating airline travel in Washington's latest move to ease the U.S. embargo on the communist-ruled island. The amendments, which take effect on Wednesday, will remove restrictions on payment and financing terms for authorized exports and re-exports to Cuba of items other than agricultural items or commodities, according to a statement from the Treasury and Commerce Commissariats. The changes will facilitate travel to Cuba by allowing block space, code sharing, and leasing arrangements with Cuban airlines, it said. They will authorize additional transactions dealing with professional meetings, disaster preparedness, information and informational materials concerning transactions incident to professional media or artistic productions in Cuba, it said, close quote. Give up? It's pretty easy. What's missing is any mention of congressional actions in this sanctions lifting. You see, this does constitute lawmaking, after all. And Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution allocates the legislative power exclusively to Congress, not Barack Obama. And I don't recall, maybe I'm forgetting something, but I don't recall any congressional legislation over the past year that's taken any steps towards restrictions removal or has changed the Cuban economic embargo one jot or tittle. Consequently, Barack Obama is once again violating the Constitution and federal law to carry out his preferred agenda item regardless of either and in the teeth of both. Just thought I would reset this particular table. Obama's opening continues to have the same effect on its commie beneficiaries as every other such opening. The Castro boys are cracking down even harder on their own people, and the number of Cubans risking everything to flee their tyrannical nightmare for the United States continues to skyrocket. Quote, this is from KRGV TV, ladies and gentlemen. I guess in Laredo, Texas. A new crush of Cuban refugees is expected to swarm the United States border in Texas over the next several days. KRGV reports that at least 7,000 men, women, and children will seek entry through the port of entry in Laredo or at the Hidalgo International Bridge in Hidalgo. Representative Henry Cuellar, a Texas Democrat representing the Lone Star State's 28th Congressional District, said Cuban refugees have started coming into Laredo from Central America through Mexico to the border. Does this sound familiar? Anybody? Everybody? Anybody? Bueller? Bueller? You know, the Border Patrol says they're ready to intercept them and keep them out of the country. And I believe them in this case because these are not the right kind of illegals. Seeing as how they would make His Infernal Majesty look bad by discrediting one of his core foreign policy initiatives. That's nothing this president will ever tolerate. Better luck next time, Giovanni Acosta and friends. If you ever get another chance, we'll be back with hour number 2 right after this. See, I'm one of those radio hosts that likes to listen to the bumper music. I'm not like Mr. Gibbs. Mr. Gibbs, as soon as the Thomas Piebald starts, I mean, you barely get into like and then blah, he just starts talking over the top of it. That's not me. There's a reason why you have a show open. There's a reason why you have a show closed. There's a reason why you have bumper music. Why not listen to it? Give it its shot. Give it its chance too. Good grief. Why even have a show open if you're just going to talk right over the top of it 2 seconds in? I suppose Doug has somewhat of an excuse in that we only have an hour on KMET and we usually have so much to talk about but still, stylistically, give the music a chance, Doug. And especially since that Thomas Piebald number was written especially for you. It's all yours, so give it a chance to shine. Good grief. I mean, Limbaugh doesn't start when Limbaugh's dun 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 dun. He doesn't start in, just talk right over the top of it 2 seconds into the program. Good grief. Of course, he's got 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, which is what we need on Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Desperately. That's the kind of break that I'm not going to say we're never going to get, but it's hard to see it, rather than through the eyes of faith, straight out of Hebrews chapter 11. How does that go again? Now that I happen to have BibleGateway.com up. Is Hebrews chapter 11 or Hebrews chapter... Oh, yeah, here it is. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the men of old gained approval. Of course, they were given specific promises, specifically, so that's a little different than a hope and a wing and a prayer. But, by the way, it's been really warm here in the Pacific Northwest. It got to 60 degrees yesterday, and pretty darn close to it today, but it's supposed to be cooling off, so. But still, 60 degrees in January, I will never complain about that, folks. Now, do you want to know, you know how I've been saying that Hillary Clinton has never, in the past 9 months since she announced her second presidential campaign, she has never, not once, not a single time, acted like she was the front runner? She's been falling all over herself, frantically prostrating herself to the far left to try to win them over, because the far left hates Hillary Clinton's flabby celluloid, whatever, fat guts, fat saggy guts. Does that work? They can't stand her, and so she's been trying desperately to win them over by telling them everything they want to hear, and they really haven't been buying it. I mean, Hillary Clinton's not likable. She's not believable. She's not trustworthy. Even among Democrats, she's underwater on being trustworthy and honest and likable. She doesn't connect with people. People don't like her. She's Nurse Ratched. She's a female Sheldon Cooper. Without the genius, of course. She's a terrible candidate. I mean, 2008 was no fluke. It wasn't a case of, well, Barack Obama, she just came along at the wrong time. You know, when a once-in-a-century talent like Barack Obama came along, and lightning in a bottle and all that. You know, the excuses that she's been making to herself for the past 8 years about how, well, it wasn't my fault. It was just Barack Obama was that good. And, well, now, as the old saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And now we see that 2008 was no accident. She really is just that awful of a candidate, and she's about to lose to a crazy, wild-eyed old socialist SOB who, yeah, she's really going to lose to Bernie Sanders, folks. She's going to lose in Iowa. She's going to lose New Hampshire. It's going to snowball from there. She's even losing significant ground in South Carolina, which was considered an impregnable firewall for her after Iowa and New Hampshire, and now she's starting to lose ground there. I mean, it's just, she's not good. 2008 was no fluke, folks. So how afraid is she? Like I say, she's never acted like the front runner from day one. If she really believed that she was the front runner and had this in the bag, and it was just not going to be any problem, there's not going to be any competition, and she was just a presumptive nominee and blah, 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 she would have tacked to the center from the beginning. She would have ignored the far left. She would have triangulated from day one. That's not what she's done. And now, do you want to see how afraid, how terrified she is of losing her last chance at the White House? Not to mention how afraid she is of a criminal indictment in Emailgate that perhaps ends her grotesque presidential ambitions for good. Want to know how afraid she is of that? This afraid. From Newsmax. Democrat presidential candidate Hillary Clinton is open to the idea of nominating Barack Hussein Obama for a seat on the Supreme Court, she said Tuesday, responding to a question from a plant at an Iowa town hall. I will certainly take that under advisement, she said in Decorah, Iowa, responding to a man's recommendation. I mean, he's brilliant. He can set forth an argument, and he has a He was a law professor, so he's got lots of credentials. Yeah. No, put on the Supreme Court the man who completely shredded the United States Constitution. That's the perfect credentials for the left. She acknowledged that there might be a few obstacles in the way. First and foremost, whether Obama would want the job after 8 years in the White House. You know, kind of like he would become the second president to go from the White House to the Supreme Court. The first one being William Howard Taft. But then, of course, William Howard Taft never really wanted to be president. He always aspired to be Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. That's, of course, not Barack Obama's aspiration. But then, Hillary is saying this to, well, number one, to pander to the far left again. But also, think about it. This woman is offering a Supreme Court seat as a more or less open bribe of the one to not prosecute her for utterly shredding, or for her utter shredding of the Espionage Act and the Federal Records Act and Emailgate. I mean, there's nothing unseemly about that, now is there? To the contrary, that's La Quinta Nostra standard operating procedure. Business as usual. Another day at the Clinton Foundation office. You know why this offer will be rejected, don't you? Easy. And it has nothing to do with ethics, or integrity, or honesty, or incorruptibility. No, being an associate justice on the United States Supreme Court would be beneath God Obama. If he's going to step down to Olympus, and he never will, but work with me here, it'll be for nothing less than the Chief Justice slot. In that scenario, I would expect John Roberts to suddenly develop health problems, kind of Vladimir Putin-like, or some sudden surprise scandal that nobody ever knew about before to erupt that forces him to step down, creating the only opening Obama would even theoretically accept. Which, of course, he wouldn't. He wants to rule the planet next. He doesn't want to be he doesn't want to be on the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the chorus of opinion predicting an indictment of Mrs. Clinton continues to grow. From Newsmax, a veteran political analyst Dick Morris says he wholeheartedly agrees with the prediction made by former House Majority Leader Tom DeLay on Newsmax TV that Hillary Clinton will be hit with criminal charges for using a private server for confidential government business as Commissar of State. Tom DeLay is precisely right. It either will be an indictment or a leaked FBI memo recommending an indictment. The indictment, of course, puts Hillary on the spot and may force her out of the race. Morris, a former advisor to Bill Clinton, said Tuesday on Newsmax Prime with J.D. Hayworth. A leak of a possible recommendation for an indictment won't force her out of the race, but it will put Obama and Loretta Lynch, the Reichsfuhrer, on the spot, or Reichsfuhrer-S, on the spot for why they're turning down the FBI recommendation for an indictment, and it will cast a pall over the entire process. Close quote. Yeah, I think Mr. Morris, I think the toe sucker is being a bit of an optimist there. Actually, I think it would cast a pall over FBI Director James Comey for allowing the leaks and probably get him canned for insubordination while Hillary staggered on, untouched by the T-Rex long arm of the law. I have to wonder if even a criminal indictment would force her from the race. I mean, think about it for a minute. Can't you picture her using that to rally the nut roots to her cause? The far left grassroots of the Democrat Party? You know, something along the lines of, the vast right-wing conspiracy is closing in to help me beat them back and win the best revenge by putting me back in the White House! I can't do witch laughs very well, but you get the idea, I trust. To secure her the Democrat nomination. And what if Lynch okayed the indictment now and then trumped up some excuse to drop the charges as this cycle's October surprise? Can we think about it? I mean, wouldn't Hillary exonerated, Hillary triumphant make great headlines to run by swing voters mere days before the November election? I mean, it would bury all her scandals in one fell swoop and completely drown out any issue debate at the same time. Makes perfect sense when you think about it. I think Lynch is the one who would wind up with the Associate Justice spot as her reward. And I think it's Obama who will put her there, though, sometime next year. After all, Obama does have to leave before any of these scenarios can unfold. And as I keep telling you people, who says he will? I know, I saw that. I saw that story too this week about Obama saying, "Oh, I wouldn't want a third term. I'm tired." Oh, bullhunk, bullpucky. You think he doesn't want a third term? You have not been paying attention for his first two. Well, I must make note of this because it was so predictable, and it's a "see, I told you so." And I don't get any pleasure out of saying this, folks. All right? I mean, as soon as the Bundy Gang occupied, quote-unquote, the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge Hair Care and Tire Center, wherever the hell they were staying, as soon as that happened, well, two things. One, I knew it was going to be a disaster for the cause that the Bundys claim to stand for. You know, the Constitution, and it's unconstitutional for the federal government to own all this land in the western states. And number two, I knew that Doug would come in and weigh in on the side of the Bundys. I knew he would do that. The Bundys are constitutionally correct. And I read what Doug said, and, you know, technically he's right. Technically the Bundys are constitutionally correct. But as I said before about this topic over the past month, it's so esoteric, it's so derivative, it is so obscure that... yeah, they might be correct, but nobody gives a damn because nobody knows why they are correct. Remember how constitutionally ignorant the American people have become by this time. They're not. Americans today, young people today are not taught the Constitution. And when you stop and think about the progressivization of socialized education in this country, I'm not even sure how far back you'd have to go to find a segment of the population that actually knows what the original intent of the Constitution was in each and every area. That's what makes Doug Gibbs so unique in this day and age. Here's a man who does not have even an associate's degree. He doesn't even have a community college degree. And yet he is self-taught. He is a constitutional expert. And he knows more about the Constitution than any high-priced lawyer with a highfalutin, expensive law school education knows about it, because they're taught case law. He studied what the founders actually wrote and meant. So, sure, Doug is technically right. The Bundys are constitutionally correct, but nobody else is going to understand that. So if you're the Bundys and you want to take a stand, you have got to realize that your battle is not on federal land in southeastern Oregon. It's not on western range land, and the battle is not with firearms and guns and whatever else. The battle is in print. It is in pixels. It is a public relations battle. And that's what the Bundys have never understood. They didn't understand it a year or almost 2 years ago when they first were in the news, when the Bureau of Land Management was threatening to seize their ranch. And I remember Cliven Bundy, the Bundy boys' father, was made the horrible mistake of agreeing to be interviewed by the New York Times, and then he just buried himself. I mean, the New York Times interviewer didn't even really have to set him up. I mean, Bundy just started burying himself. He sounded like Archie Bunker being interviewed by the New York Times. You can picture how that would turn out. This is pretty much the same thing. So the Bundys don't have the slightest clue about propaganda. They don't have the slightest clue about public relations. They got chewed up and spit out 2 years ago. So how did you think this was going to be covered? How did you think this was going to turn out? Well, we saw earlier this week. This sorry episode ended pretty much as ignominiously as I figured it would, ladies and gentlemen. From the Oregonian, one person was killed and several others arrested in Oregon on Tuesday, or in a Tuesday shootout between police and anti-government gunmen, notice the choice of words, that had been occupying a federal wildlife refuge. Yeah, anti-government gunmen, ladies and gentlemen. That sounds more like John Dillinger or Al Capone than it does George Washington, doesn't it? Are you all starting to see just how public relations foolhardy the Bundy stunt was? The FBI said that Amon Bundy, the rancher who led the January 2nd occupation in the northwestern state, was among 5 people arrested when federal agents and state troopers stopped vehicles carrying the activists on a remote ice-covered highway. Bundy, age 40, faces a federal felony charge of conspiracy to... Boy, this is a long name for a charge. Conspiracy to impede officers of the United States from discharging their official duties through the use of force, intimidation, or threats, the FBI said in a statement. During the arrest operation, there were shots fired. Of course there were. Authorities did not immediately identify the dead person, who the Oregonian said was group spokesman Robert Lavoy Finicum. Well, at least the Bundys can take comfort in the fact that they got a martyr out of the deal, right? Not necessarily. Details of the incident remain unclear, but apparently 2 men, including Bundy's 43-year-old or older brother Ryan, disobeyed orders and resisted arrest, resulting in shots being fired. Leading to the $64 question of who fired the first shot. A question, the answer to which isn't worth even that much, because if the Bundys opened up first, obviously that would be a forfeiture of whatever moral high ground they were trying to occupy. And if it was law enforcement that initiated the hot lead exchange, well, so what? I'm describing. I'm not just calm down, okay? I'm not saying. I'm not taking the Fed's side by any means. I'm just describing this from how the media is going to depict it to the American public. You know, the American public that is easily led around by the nose and gets all their news from the what Michael Reagan used to refer to as the 21-inch peephole into paradise. Low information voters. This is what they're going to hear, folks. So if it was law enforcement that initiated the hot lead exchange, so what? Their targets were male and white and conservative and claimed to be constitutionalists and were anti-government gunmen, outlaws, criminals. Or, in other words, precisely as they, the Bundy Gang, wittingly or unwittingly painted themselves to the entire country. Which means, of course, the media really didn't have to lift much of a finger to even set them up. The Bundys did it to themselves. It's like they were saying, yeah, that's right, we are extremists. We are anti-government gunmen. We are domestic terrorists. All these things that the media is going to call them and describe them as, and paint with a very large brush anybody who is a constitutional originalist. Let's not leave out racists. And this was in the Oregonian study as well, or story as well. The Bundy what? Oh boy, I gotta fix that. Yeah, and that wasn't even my typo, but I gotta fix it anyway. Whoops. Okay, that took care of it. The Bundy brothers are the sons of Cliven Bundy, 69. This is what low information voters are going to hear. This is what the Oregonian said. The Bundy brothers are the sons of Cliven Bundy, 69, a racist, vitriolic, anti-government activist who, in 2014, engaged in an armed standoff with federal authorities over unpaid cattle grazing fees at his Nevada ranch. And no, they weren't unpaid cattle grazing. That makes it sound like, A, the fees were legitimate, which they weren't, and two, it makes Cliven Bundy sound like a deadbeat at best, which he wasn't. He was right. Again, constitutionally correct, but when they're going to practically do the media's job of burying them and destroying their reputation anyway, then it really ceases to matter whether they're constitutionally right or not. That's not how they're going to be depicted. Now, these were despotic government. This was despotic government extortion, not unpaid cattle grazing fees. But nobody will ever know or understand that because the Bundys were fighting, again, the wrong battle. They thought they were the 21st century Minutemen, and the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge was their Lexington and Concord. But the real battle was one of ink and newsprint and pixels. And there, in the battle that actually mattered, they got slaughtered. And their, or really our, cause got slaughtered right along with them. As Rocky Balboa told the loan shark client, "You should have planned ahead." Now, after I wrote about this the other day, politicalpistachio.com. One of Doug's followers posted a YouTube video that claimed, I'm not saying, oh, claimed, quote unquote. I'm not, this is what a witness in the car said. Basically, the witness who apparently was in the car said that Mr. Finicum, the fatality in this gun battle, got out of the car, and I mean, it was almost exactly how Black Lives Matter claimed that Michael Brown was gunned down by Officer Darren Wilson. You know, he put his hands up. He said, "Don't shoot. I'm not armed." I don't know whether he was or not, but that's not really the point here. And then the feds just opened up on him and cut him in half with machine gun fire or whatever the hell it was. That's what this witness says. You can, like, the video is posted at politicalpistachio.com. You can watch it for yourself. Now, of course, this doesn't explain why only Mr. Finicum was gunned down and not everybody else in the car. Or heck, it doesn't explain why they didn't use a mortar round and just blow up the entire car and been done with it. As for Finicum himself, I'm guessing the reputation the Bundys created for themselves preceded him. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe they told him stay in the car, and he got out of the car anyway. Maybe that was it. And you know I mean, we've heard the stories about how the FBI was trying to infiltrate the Bundy Gang, the protesters, the occupiers, if you will, and try to make them look bad. You know, we've seen that. We've seen those stories. But the Bundys created a lot of that problem for themselves. You know, this was an armed occupation, and there was a heavy emphasis on how armed they were. So when they're told to stay in the car, and then Mr. Finicum climbs out of the car anyway, it's possible it was just a misunderstanding or a hair trigger, tense situation. And we'll close this item in the stack with this. How would you like to be a member of the Bundy Gang for the past month and then hear this? And I quote from Newsmax. The leader of a month-long armed occupation of a federal wildlife refuge in Oregon urged remaining protesters on yesterday, to leave the site and go home a day after his arrest and the death of a supporter. And I know what some of you are going to say. Oh, he was coerced. They had a gun to his head. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. But this is what he's saying. Now, Amon Bundy, who was taken into custody with several members of his group at a traffic stop along Highway 395, north of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in southeast Oregon, urged federal authorities to let his comrades leave the compound without being prosecuted. Lots of luck with that. To those remaining at the refuge, I love you. Let me take this fight from here. Please stand down. Please stand down. Go home and hug your families. Please go home, Bundy said in a statement read by his attorney, Michael Arnold, following a court hearing. Jason Patrick, who remained at the refuge following Bundy's arrest on Tuesday, told Reuters by phone that some protesters were leaving on Wednesday afternoon through checkpoints set up by authorities, but rejected the word surrender, close quote. But that's exactly what this is. Also, capitulation and running up the white flag. Heck, it's a sellout and betrayal by Bundy. I mean, he's the one who organized this operation. He's the one who was taking a stand against federal tyranny, sort of. He's the one who encouraged all those who followed him into this 21st century Alamo. And now he's folding his tent after a single fatality? What a rhino wimp. I bet he has Mitch McConnell's face tattooed on one butt cheek and John Boehner's stenciled on the other. Of course, in reality, Amon Bundy was brought face to face with the reality of what he was attempting. Leading a range war, insurrection, sounded romanticist, I'm sure, but what it came down to was a one-sided gun battle on a deserted road at night that got one of his buddies killed. Somebody who would still be alive today if Mr. Bundy had made a different choice. That's going to take the fight out of you real quick. Very sobering experience, especially thinking that could have been me. Also, the feds, in other words, they didn't count the cost. Maybe I don't know, maybe they thought the feds wouldn't do it, then they could just call their bluff, but, well, it went the other way around, actually. Also, the feds haven't relinquished a single pebble or dirt clod of all the western land they own. And Dwight and Steve Hammond, remember them? The ranchers who were conducting planned burns on their own property to clear out underbrush so that forest fires would be more difficult to start during the summer. And then remember the government said, "You can't do that, you're arsonists," blah, blah. And it was a dispute over land use. And remember, the Bundys were occupying the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge in order to try to force the feds to release the Hammonds. And then remember, the Hammonds said, "Hey, don't bring us into this. We don't have anything to do with the Bundys. This is not our idea. This is all on them." Well, they're still behind bars. They for whom supposedly, ostensibly, this occupation was carried out. So it accomplished nothing. Absolutely nothing. Beyond making constitutionalists look extreme. Now, can we all at least agree definitively, conclusively, and beyond dispute that once and for all, right does not make might? Please? What in the world? Oh. Well, this is why I entitled today's program, Attack of the 50-Foot Megyn Kelly. You remember there was that B movie, so bad it became a classic, a cult classic, back in the 50s or 60s. It was entitled Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. Attack of the 50-Foot Megyn Kelly. Because, of course, Donald Trump has run away from Megyn Kelly yet again. Tonight's debate, moderated by Fox News Channel. Guess who's going to be on the moderator panel? That's right, Megyn Kelly. And Donald Trump just couldn't resist starting up his personal war against Megyn Kelly again. Tried to get her thrown off the panel. Fox said, well, let's just say, let me find it here. Let's just say that Fox News Channel's reply was, for all intents and purposes, and you can't blame them, you can't have a candidate dictating to a network who the moderators are going to be in a debate. Yeah, that's not how it works. So I guess tonight's Iowa caucus's eve Fox News moderated GOP debate has just lost its hugeness. Guess who's not going to be there tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Here's the quote from DonaldJTrump.com. Unlike the very stupid, highly incompetent people running our country into the ground, Trump knows when to walk away. Roger Ailes and Fox News think they can toy with him, but Trump doesn't play games. There have already been 6 debates, and according to all online debate polls, including Drudge, Slate, Time Magazine, and many others, Trump has won all of them. No, he hasn't. Trust me, he hasn't won all of them. In particular, the last one. Actually, he's been sedate ever since the first one, with the first Trump-Megyn Kelly battle, you might say. Whereas he has always been a job creator and not a debater, he nevertheless truly enjoys the debating process. Well, apparently not when Megyn Kelly's on the panel. And it has been very good for him, both in polls and popularity. He will not be participating in the Fox News debate and will instead host an event in Iowa to raise money for the veterans and wounded warriors who have been treated so horribly by our all-talk, no-action politicians. Close quote. And it will be covered by every network except Fox and probably outdraw the debate, and nobody will bother noticing that Trump is just using American veterans as campaign props again for his huge megalomania. And his zombie followers will roar in approval, yeah! And then lurch off in search of Megyn Kelly's latest menses. Fox News released their statement on the matter, unwittingly playing their prominent role in the never-ending Trump drama. Quote, as many of our viewers know, Fox News is hosting a sanctioned debate in Des Moines, Iowa on Thursday night, 3 days before the first votes of the 2016 election are cast in the Iowa caucus. Donald Trump is refusing to debate 7 of his fellow presidential candidates on stage that night, which is near unprecedented. We're not sure how Iowans are going to feel about him walking away from them at the last minute, but it should be clear to the American public by now that this is rooted in one thing. Megyn Kelly, whom he has viciously attacked since August and has now spent 4 days demanding be removed from the debate stage. Capitulating to politicians' ultimatums about a debate moderator violates all journalistic standards, as do threats, including the one leveled by Trump's campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, toward Megyn Kelly. In a call on Monday with a Fox News executive, Lewandowski stated that Megyn had a rough couple of days after that last debate. That would be the avalanche of death threats against her from Trumplicans. And he would hate to have her go through that again. Lewandowski was warned not to level any more threats, but he continued to do so. We cannot give in to terrorizations toward any of our employees. Trump is still welcome at Thursday night's debate and will be treated fairly, just as he has been during his 132 appearances on Fox News and Fox Business, but he cannot dictate the moderators or the questions. Close quote. Now, terrorizations is a bit melodramatic. I mean, it's not like Lewandowski or the Trump campaign issued the threats themselves, but he was exploiting those threats and saying, well, along the lines of, it'd be a shame if anything happened to Megyn if Fox refuses to remove her as a moderator, that kind of thing. It's classic Trump passive-aggressive, Well, I'm not saying this, but a lot of people tell me this on the campaign trail. I mean, that's trademark Trump. So terrorizations may be a bit melodramatic, but otherwise, go Fox! For what it's worth. But this fits the Trump pattern of being a douchebag in inverse proximity to the targets of his douchebaggery. In other words, he's a coward. On Twitter, he is almighty, while in person, he's the ultimate diplomat. Put another way, Megyn Kelly has balls the size of near-Earth objects compared to the billionaire slumlord. Something he was willing to admit to her face only 4 short years ago. Back in 2011, he actually said that he could not touch Megyn Kelly as a debate moderator. He said, "No, I could never beat you. You're tremendous." And you know what? He probably meant it at the time because she wasn't directly challenging him at the time. Either that or he thought that politeness and deference might get him into her pants after the interview. You know, Trump Tower! So, will no showing this debate hurt Trump? Well, given that nothing seems to hurt Trump, the answer would seem to be no. But I would advise Ted Cruz to use tonight's debate as a closing argument for his candidacy instead of bombarding an empty podium. You know, even though talking about his instability, his mercurialness, his unpredictability, his unreliability, yeah, that could leave a mark, but I still lean towards just, he's not there, don't talk about him. Don't talk about it. I've always believed that ignoring Trump and denying him media oxygen and otherwise reducing him and taking away his multi-gigawatt spotlight has been and is the best strategy to employ against him. Now that he's taken himself out of tonight's equation, run to daylight, Ted, and don't look back. In lieu of an exit thought, here's what I wrote after the last Fox News debate, and it's just as applicable 6 months later. All you Tea Party Trump lovers think that your guy is going to make an awesome president because he's going to spend 4 years kicking asses and taking names, right? But in politics, in foreign policy, the other side gets to kick back. And when you're the President of the United States, you cannot make fun of, say, Angela Merkel's desiccated menstrual flow, or challenge Vladimir Putin to a penis measuring contest, and boy, doesn't that have a totally different context now. Or blow off Xi Jinping as a slant-eyed gook when they refuse to be impressed or cowed by Trump's Trumpiness, because boorish bluster can have consequences. Not least of which is making Barack Obama look like the epitome of seriousness and statesmanship by comparison. Put another way, if Donald Trump can't even hang with Megyn Kelly in a serious conversation without throwing a temper tantrum, how's he going to clean up the god-awful mess Barack Obama leaves behind, assuming he ever leaves? And here's an interesting theory for his debate no-show. It's very interesting. So he can blame an Iowa defeat on Megyn Kelly and Fox News. Someone at redstate.com posited this. Would Trump rather lose Iowa and have to seem weak by making excuses, or lose Iowa with a tangible reason that he can echo with his whining about everything being unfairly stacked against him? Yeah, I said that from day one, that his definition of fairness is making the Republican Party stack the deck in his favor. Remember, he has very little that he can gain from a debate containing substance, and this debate will likely focus more on substantive issues than any of the previous debates. He's good when the topics are fighting ISIS or sealing the border, but he fails when they ask him tough questions such as how to fix the nuclear triad. Now, if he wins Iowa without the debate, he's in the strongest possible position to win the nomination. If he loses Iowa but has the Fox News asterisk to place next to his defeat, he'll attempt to turn that into momentum for New Hampshire and beyond. This cannot be allowed to play out as he has planned. People must be made aware of what he's going to do so they can see it unfold with discernment. Otherwise, they'll risk hearing his Pied Piper call. Close quote. Now, I don't know. It seems to me that defeat would make him look weak regardless of the excuse, and blaming it on the mean, unfair Megyn Kelly and Fox News Channel, and boy, doesn't that sound like what a Democrat would say? It seemed to me that blaming it on Fox would be an even lamer excuse. The core of Trumpism, after all, is that Trump never loses. Not Trump wins when Megyn Kelly allows it. Although Trump debates when Megyn Kelly isn't around is pretty much the meme he's carrying out now, so maybe he can't discern the difference. Plus, doesn't the idea that Trump would be laying the groundwork for using an Iowa defeat to set up a New Hampshire comeback quietly presuppose that his defeat in the Granite State is a serious possibility? Isn't he supposedly up in the polls there by double digits? Does he really need a Hawkeye jiu-jitsu crutch? Maybe he's playing the biggest inevitability, preemption, self-fulfilling prophecy scam of all time. It's just food for thought, folks. Maybe he's not as far ahead as the polls indicate. Just maybe. And finally, final item today. Taiwan flexes its military muscle right in Red China's face. Terrific. Now, Tsai Ing-wen, the new Taiwanese, the Taiwanese president-elect, hasn't officially taken office yet, so these rather aggressive naval exercises can't be attributed to her, but I'm sure the Obama regime will do so anyway. Quote is from Yahoo!.com. Taiwan carried out military drills Wednesday with naval chiefs assuring residents the island is safe as concerns grow that tensions will escalate with Red China after recent presidential elections. The drills were the first since Tsai Ing-wen of the China skeptic Democratic Progressive Party swept to victory in the elections earlier this month. She ousted the ruling Beijing-friendly Kuomintang, bringing to an end 8 years of unprecedented appeasement of Red China. On Wednesday, the Taiwanese Navy deployed 8 warships and fired flares from a missile corvette during an exercise in waters off So Ying in southern Taiwan, home to the island's naval headquarters, close quote. They also scrambled F-16 Fighting Falcon fighters and landed amphibious forces on Kinmen Island, an entire 5 miles off the Chaikom coast, swimming distance, literally. And Taiwan's outgoing president, Ma Ying-jeou, is planning an official visit to another disputed Taiwanese possession in the South China Sea, named Itu Aba. Now, pre-Obama, this would all have been to the good. Beijing would have bitched and moaned, but they ultimately would not have risked a confrontation with the United States to swat down or invade and conquer outright the Taiwanese. And the latter could have conducted these military exercises secure and confident in that support. But now, the Chi-Coms don't fear us, and the recent Taiwanese election amply demonstrates that they have written us off as an ally and patron and are charting their own unilateral foreign policy. So we don't have much, if any, influence with or over Taipei either. And yet, if a confrontation develops between the two Chinas, the United States will still get dragged into it, involuntarily and not on our initiative, schedule, or terms. It's the worst of all worlds. We have no superpower influence or capabilities anymore, but we still have the superpower reputation and animus against us. We are literally the pitiful, helpless giant of President Richard Nixon's one-time depiction. And this is just one flashpoint of many around the planet over which we have just as little control. Gosh, I love smart power. "22 hours from now, Open Thighs Friday arrives on the Hard Starboard Radio Network, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Tomorrow, blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. If you're going to watch the debate, may God have mercy on your soul. See you tomorrow."